The blade spun through the zero-gravity chamber like a silver comet, its monomolecular edge catching the harsh overhead lights as it carved a perfect arc toward Kyle's throat. He'd made worse decisions in his life, though, admittedly, not many. Accepting a formal Krethar blade challenge ranked somewhere between catastrophically stupid and did you check your brain at the door on the scale of human judgment calls. But here he was, floating in a transparent sphere, while 200 alien species watched from the observation deck, waiting to see if the human would bleed blue, red, or maybe just explode into a pink mist when that blade connected. 6 months. Kyle had been stationed on Olympus Prime for exactly 6 months, serving as a military liaison to species that had been traveling between stars since before humans figured out agriculture. 6 months of careful diplomacy, measured words, and biting his tongue so hard he'd probably done permanent damage. 6 months of proving that yes, humans could play nice with the galactic community. All of that was about to end because Ambassador Thixlon, a 4-armed insectoid whose mandibles clicked when he was annoyed, which was constantly, had decided today was the perfect day to call humanity soft-skinned primitives who stumbled into space technology like children finding their parents' tools. Kyle should have smiled and nodded. Should have turned the other cheek. Should have done literally anything except what he actually did, which was look Thixlon dead in his compound eyes and say, "Funny, I was going to say the same thing about your trade negotiations, but I figured 4 arms would mean you could manage to avoid shooting yourself in the foot. Guess evolution works in mysterious ways." The council chamber had gone so quiet, you could have heard a pin drop, if pins made any sound in the station's processed atmosphere, which they didn't, but the metaphor stood. Thixlon's exoskeleton had flushed a deep purple, which Kyle's cultural briefings had taught him meant rage barely contained by social convention. His second-in-command, Commander Uxmoth, had stepped forward immediately, chittering something in the clicking Krethar language that the translation implant in Kyle's ear rendered as, "Challenge issued. Traditional combat. First blood. Accept or bring shame to your species for cowardice." And because Kyle was apparently committed to the bit at this point, he'd said yes. "You accepted a what?" Ivy's voice had crackled through his comm unit approximately 3 seconds after the formal challenge was logged. "Kyle, I know your brain cells are lonely, but this is— tell me you're joking. Please tell me this is some elaborate human humor that I'm not getting, because I'm too busy being the only person on this station with functioning survival instincts." Kyle had been in the prep chamber at that point, stripping down to the light combat suit required for the duel. "It's done, Ivy. I accepted. Protocol is protocol." "Protocol is protocol," she'd mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "You know what else is protocol? Not dying in a stupid duel because you couldn't keep your mouth shut for 5 more seconds." "He called us primitives." "We are primitives. We've been in space for 30 years. My grandmother remembers when the fastest thing humanity had was a jumbo jet held together with hope and recycled aluminum." A pause. "I'm coming down there." "You're not allowed." "I'm coming down there, and I'm going to watch you not die. And then I'm going to kill you myself for being an idiot." That had been 20 minutes ago. Now Kyle was in the sphere, watching Uxmoth circle him with the fluid grace of a species that had evolved in low gravity. The Krethar were born for this. 4 arms, each one capable of independent weapon handling. Bodies covered in natural armor plating. Reaction times that made human reflexes look like slow-motion replays. The observation deck wrapped around the combat sphere in a half-circle of reinforced transparent aluminum, packed with alien dignitaries who'd cleared their schedules the moment word spread that a human had accepted a Krethar challenge. Most of them probably had bets running. Kyle spotted Magistrate Oxel in the front row, his crystalline form refracting light into rainbow patterns. The Lucath Union representative had actually spoken in Kyle's defense during the initial confrontation, pointing out that humans had contributed 3 innovative solutions to interstellar travel efficiency in just the last month. Thixelon had dismissed that as accidentally useful, which was rich coming from a species whose primary contribution to galactic civilization was apparently being really good at holding grudges. Uxmoth struck without warning, because of course he did. The blade came in low, a sweeping cut designed to open Kyle's side from hip to ribcage. Kyle kicked off the chamber wall, using the zero-gravity environment to twist away. The Krethar fighting style was efficient, brutal, perfected over thousands of years. The human fighting style was, well, chaotic improvisation was probably the charitable description. "He's actually holding his own," Ivy's voice crackled in his ear, sounding surprised despite herself. "Okay, so maybe you're not completely useless. Still an idiot, but not a completely useless idiot." Kyle didn't waste breath responding. Uxmoth was already coming around for another pass, this time with 2 blades active. The monomolecular edges could cut through most materials like they weren't even there, which meant blocking was a terrible idea. Dodging was the only option, and Kyle was running out of chamber. He caught a handhold, used it to change his trajectory at the last second. One blade whispered past his shoulder, close enough that he felt the displacement of air, or whatever the station used for atmosphere that supposedly smelled like Earth air, but had a weird, metallic aftertaste nobody mentioned in the brochures. "Nice!" Ivy cheered. "Now just do that about 60 more times, and you might survive." "Your confidence is inspiring," Kyle grunted, pushing off another wall. Uxmoth wasn't frustrated yet, but Kyle could see the calculation happening behind those multifaceted eyes. Humans weren't supposed to be this hard to kill. The briefing said they were slow, fragile, with limited spatial awareness in zero gravity. Kyle was proving those briefings catastrophically wrong, which probably meant someone in Krethar intelligence was having a bad day. Good. The next exchange was faster. Uxmoth was testing Kyle's limits, probing for weaknesses. Kyle blocked with his own blade, felt the impact shudder up his arm. Bad idea. Blocking gave Uxmoth information about his strength, his leverage, his timing, but sometimes bad ideas were all you had. "He's setting you up," Ivy warned. "Watch the secondary arms." Uxmoth threw. It wasn't part of the traditional Krethar dueling style, which was probably why it caught Kyle completely off guard. One of the blades simply left Uxmoth's lower right hand, spinning through the air in a perfect kill trajectory, aimed at Kyle's throat. The Krethar commander had calculated the angle, the spin, the velocity, everything necessary to end this fight in the most efficient way possible. Kyle's brain processed the threat in the fragment of a second he had. Too far to dodge, too fast to deflect. The blade was going to hit him, probably sever his carotid artery, and he was going to bleed out in a zero-gravity sphere, while 200 alien species watched and concluded that, yeah, humans really were too primitive for this. His hand shot out on pure instinct. He was going to catch it, or die trying, which at this point seemed like the same thing. His fingers closed on empty air exactly 1 millimeter from the blade's handle. The blade stopped. Not because Kyle caught it. The blade just stopped. Hung in space, like it had hit an invisible wall, perfectly motionless, despite all the momentum that should have carried it forward. The monomolecular edge gleamed in the harsh lights, so close to Kyle's fingers that he could see the molecular structure of the metal in microscopic detail his eyes shouldn't be able to resolve. The observation deck went silent. Kyle stared at his hand. His very normal, very human, absolutely not supposed to do this hand, which was now glowing with a faint blue-white light that definitely hadn't been there before. The light traced patterns along his palm, up his fingers, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Ivy said eloquently. Kyle? What the hell are you doing? I have no idea, Kyle whispered. The blade hummed. Actually hummed. A low vibration that he could feel in his bones, like it was trying to move forward but couldn't. Like something was holding it in place with absolute certainty that physics was optional. Uxmoth had frozen mid-lunge, his compound, eyes fixed on the impossible sight. In the observation deck, someone, Kyle couldn't see who, made a sound that the translator rendered as impossible. Magistrate Oxul rose from his seat, his crystalline body refracting light into sharp, geometric patterns. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who'd just witnessed something that rewrote fundamental assumptions about reality. The human has manifested a kinetic lock, Oxul said slowly. But his species has no psionic rating. Humans are baseline. They can't. Thixelon exploded from his seat, all four arms gesturing wildly. Cheating! The human is using hidden technology. Scan him immediately. This is a violation of challenge protocols. Kyle would have responded, but he was slightly preoccupied with the fact that his hand was glowing, and a deadly blade was frozen in midair, and nothing about this made any sense. He tried to move his hand, slowly, carefully, and the blade moved with it, maintaining that exact millimeter distance like it was magnetically locked to his palm. Okay, Ivy said, her voice climbing an octave. Okay, so this is new. This is definitely new. Kyle, did you know you could do this? No. So this is just, what? Surprise psychic powers? Is this a human thing? Did we all have this and nobody mentioned it? I don't know. The chamber doors opened and a security team poured in, 3 species Kyle didn't recognize, all armed with weapons that were probably set to stun. Probably. The combat sphere depressurized slowly, gravity returning in increments that made Kyle's stomach lurch. The blade finally dropped as his concentration shattered under the weight of approximately 12 different people shouting in languages his translator couldn't keep up with. Uxmoth caught the blade automatically, but he was staring at Kyle like he'd just grown a second head, which, given the circumstances, would have been less surprising than spontaneous psionic abilities in a species that wasn't supposed to have any. Magistrate Oxul pushed through the crowd, his crystalline form catching light and throwing prismatic patterns across the walls. Nobody touch him. I need Dr. Phillip. Where is the station's xenobiologist? Here! A human voice, thank God. Dr. Philip Coe pushed through the aliens, carrying a medical scanner that looked like someone had crossed a tricorder with a fever dream. I was watching from the medical bay. What the hell just happened? That's what we're all trying to figure out, Oxul said. He turned those geometric eyes on Kyle. Can you replicate the effect? Kyle held up his hand, now perfectly normal, no glow, no impossible physics-defying powers. I don't even know what I did. It just happened. Humans don't have psionics, Thixelon hissed from the observation deck. This is technology. It has to be. Scan him. Philip didn't wait for permission, running the scanner over Kyle's body in quick, efficient movements. The device beeped, whirred, displayed readouts that meant nothing to Kyle. After 30 seconds that felt like 30 hours, Philip looked up. No implants, no external tech, no cybernetic augmentation. He's completely baseline human. Then how? Someone started. His neural activity is off the charts, Philip interrupted, studying the scanner with the intensity of someone who'd just found something terrifying and fascinating in equal measure. Synaptic firing patterns I've never seen before, but there's nothing artificial. This is biological. The crowd erupted again. Accusations, theories, demands for quarantine or study or immediate expulsion from the station. Kyle caught Ivy's eye through the observation window. She'd made it to the front row, her face pale but determined. She mouthed 2 words. Not dying. Kyle managed a weak smile. Yet, he mouthed back. Oxel raised one crystalline appendage, and the crowd settled. Not because he'd asked, but because the Lucath Union carried weight that even Thixlan couldn't ignore. The duel is void, Oxel declared. Psionic interference invalidates traditional combat protocols. Kyle will be placed under observation. Quarantine, Thixlan cut in. Observation, Oxel repeated firmly, until we understand what happened here. This changes nothing about humanity's standing in the Council. This changes everything! Thixlan's mandibles clicked rapidly. An unknown species develops psionic abilities without warning? Do you understand what that means? Yeah, Kyle understood. It meant he'd just made humanity very, very interesting to every species in the galaxy, and interesting was rarely a good thing in interstellar politics. The quarantine suite was nicer than Kyle's regular quarters, which somehow made it worse. Soft lighting, a bed that adjusted to human physiology, a viewport showing the slow rotation of stars, all the comforts of house arrest dressed up as concerned observation. Ivy had ignored the quarantine order within the first hour, appearing at his door with contraband coffee and the expression that dared security to stop her. They hadn't. So, she said, settling into the chair across from his bed, spontaneous psychic powers. That's new. Helpful observation. I'm helpful like that. She took a sip of her coffee, made a face. This station's synthetic stuff tastes like battery acid filtered through regret. Anyway, can you do it again? Kyle held up his hand, concentrated. Nothing happened. No glow, no impossible physics, just 5 normal fingers attached to a very confused human. I've been trying for the past hour. Nothing. Maybe you need the right stimulus. Mortal danger seemed to work pretty well. Are you volunteering to throw another blade at my face? I mean, I wasn't not volunteering. Ivy grinned, but it didn't reach her eyes. Kyle, what happened out there? You know this is going to spread, right? Every species in the Council is going to hear about this by morning. Cycle. Humans manifesting psionics when we're not supposed to have any? That's not just gossip. That's a diplomatic incident with legs. I know. Do you, though? Because from where I'm sitting, you just painted a target on humanity's collective back. Species take millions of years to develop psionic abilities, if they develop them at all. We've been in space for 30 years, and suddenly, she gestured at his hand, surprise party tricks that violate known xenobiology. Kyle leaned back against the wall, exhaustion settling into his bones. It wasn't exactly planned. Nothing with you ever is. She paused. You remember anything weird from before? Times when things didn't quite make sense? He wanted to say no, wanted to dismiss the question as irrelevant. But there were moments, scattered through his life like breadcrumbs leading to this exact situation, that he'd always written off as luck or coincidence. The glass that should have shattered when it fell, but somehow stopped mid-air. The car that screeched to a halt centimeters before impact, close enough to touch the bumper. Times when danger seemed to pause, just for a heartbeat, just long enough for him to react. Maybe, he admitted. Nothing concrete, just odd moments. Odd moments where physics took a coffee break and forgot to come back? Something like that. The door chimed before Ivy could respond. Dr. Philip entered, carrying enough scanning equipment to stock a small medical facility. His eyes were bloodshot, hair sticking up at angles that suggested he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. "You look terrible," Ivy observed. "I've been analyzing Kyle's neural patterns for 3 hours. Terrible is an upgrade." Philip started setting up equipment on the desk, moving with the manic energy of someone operating on pure intellectual curiosity, and possibly too much caffeine. The Galactic Medical Database has records of 638 psionic species. I've cross-referenced Kyle's brain activity against all of them. Want to guess what I found? "Nothing matches," Kyle said. "Nothing matches," Philip confirmed. "Your neural firing patterns don't correspond to any known psionic framework. It's like, okay, bad metaphor incoming, it's like every other psionic species learned to play piano, and you just invented jazz. Same basic instrument, completely different approach." "Is that good or bad?" Ivy asked. "Yes." Philip pulled up holographic displays, showing what looked like fireworks mapped onto a human brain. "The activation pattern is all wrong. Standard psionic abilities require conscious control, meditation, years of training. Yours triggered under stress, purely reflexive. No conscious thought, no preparation. You didn't use psionics. You manifested them as a survival response." Kyle stared at the display. "So what does that mean?" "It means human evolution might have developed psionic potential as a defensive mechanism rather than an offensive tool. Earth is, forgive me, a nightmare planet compared to most inhabited worlds. Predators, natural disasters, diseases, other humans trying to kill you for resources. Your species evolved under constant threat. Maybe somewhere in that evolutionary pressure, your brains developed a last-ditch survival reflex that only activates when you're about to die." "That's actually horrifying," Ivy said. "That's actually fascinating," Philip corrected. "Most psionic species evolved the ability slowly, over millions of years, as a tool for communication or environmental manipulation. Humans might have evolved it as a panic button, a stop the universe for 1 second so I cannot die reflex." Kyle's hand clenched involuntarily. "Can you test it?" "Test what? Whether I can put you in mortal danger and see if your brain rewrites physics again? The ethics board would have questions." "The ethics board can—" Kyle started. A wrench flew across the room. Kyle's hand shot up, and the wrench stopped. Just stopped, hanging in the air exactly where his reflexes said it should be, surrounded by that same blue-white glow. His palm lit up like someone had installed bioluminescent circuitry under his skin. "What the hell, Ivy?" Philip shouted. Ivy stood by the desk, hand still raised from her throw, looking entirely too pleased with herself. "Testing the hypothesis. You're welcome." "You could have killed him." "I aimed for his shoulder. Besides, it worked, didn't it?" She pointed at the floating wrench. "Stress response, just like you said. Kyle's brain goes, 'Oh no, incoming danger,' and reality takes a time out." The wrench dropped as Kyle's concentration shattered under the weight of what just happened. It clanged against the floor with a sound that seemed too loud in the sudden quiet. "Okay," Kyle said slowly. "Okay, so it's real. It's repeatable. I have—" He couldn't quite say it. "You have psionic abilities," Philip finished. "Latent, stress-activated, completely outside the normal xenobiological framework. Which means—" The door chimed again. This time Magistrate Oxel entered, his crystalline form refracting the room's light into geometric patterns that danced across the walls. He moved with the deliberate precision of someone carrying heavy news. "Magistrate," Philip acknowledged. "We were just—" "I know what you were doing. Half the station heard the shouting." Oxel's voice resonated like wind through crystal chambers. "I'm here because we have a significant problem, and Kyle needs to understand the full scope of what his manifestation means." "Worse than humans' mysteriously developed psychic powers?" Ivy asked. "Much worse." Oxel pulled up a holographic display from his personal device. Ancient text scrolled across the projection, symbols Kyle didn't recognize. 60,000 years ago, a species called the Ulm developed psionic abilities rapidly. Over the course of just a few thousand years, evolutionary blink of an eye by Galactic standards. "What happened to them?" Kyle asked, though he suspected he knew. "They were wiped out, completely. Every planet, every colony, every ship. A coalition of older species that are still represented in the current council, deemed the Ulm too dangerous to exist. The official records call it the Ulm aggression, but the truth is more complicated. The Ulm expanded too quickly, used their psionics too freely. The older species saw them as an existential threat." The room went very quiet. "That coalition still exists," Oxel continued. "They call themselves the Preservation Collective now. Their stated purpose is maintaining galactic stability. Their actual purpose is ensuring no species becomes powerful enough to threaten the established order." "Let me guess," Ivy said. "Thixlon is a member." "Thixlon is a founding member, as are representatives from 43 other species currently sitting on the council." Oxel's form shifted, light patterns changing in ways that suggested concern. "Kyle, your manifestation wasn't coincidental. The challenge, the insult, the duel, it was a test. The Preservation Collective has been monitoring humanity since first contact, looking for signs of psionic potential. They needed to see if humans would manifest abilities under pressure. And I just gave them confirmation," Kyle said flatly. "You gave them evidence. In 3 days, the Preservation Collective will vote on humanity's status. The options are quarantine, cutting Earth off from galactic civilization permanently, or preemptive containment." "Containment?" Philip repeated. "You mean military action?" "Yes." Oxel's light patterns flickered. "I'm telling you this because not all species agree with the Collective's methods. Some of us believe humanity deserves a chance. But you need to understand what's at stake. This isn't about you anymore. It's about whether your entire species gets to keep reaching for the stars, or gets pushed back down and locked away for having the audacity to be interesting." Kyle looked at his hand. Normal, unremarkable, completely ordinary except for the impossible thing it could do. 3 days to save humanity from repeating the Ulm's fate. Perfect. Just perfect. The testing chamber smelled like ozone and poor decisions. Kyle stood in the center while Philip adjusted sensors, muttering calculations under his breath. Ivy leaned against the wall, tossing a rubber ball up and catching it repeatedly. The picture of casual observation, except for the manic gleam in her eyes. "So the plan," she said, "is to throw things at you until we figure out the rules of your magic brain powers." "Oversimplified, but essentially correct," Philip confirmed. "I love how this is somehow the official scientific method now." "The official scientific method involves peer review and controlled conditions. This is more like panic research before the galaxy decides to glass Earth." Philip looked up from his equipment. "Kyle, try to stay relaxed. The ability seems to trigger under threat, so—" Ivy threw the ball. Kyle's hand moved automatically, and the ball stopped mid-flight, surrounded by blue-white light. It hung there for 3 seconds before dropping. Good, Philip checked his readings. Neural activity spiked exactly 0.3 seconds before the ball would have made contact. Your brain is predicting threats and activating the response preemptively. That's terrifying from an evolutionary standpoint. Your species developed precognitive threat assessment. Can we focus on the part where I can control this? Kyle flexed his fingers. The glow had already faded. Control implies conscious direction. What you have is more like a really aggressive immune system that attacks physics when it thinks you're in danger. Philip made notes on his tablet. Try triggering it deliberately. No external threat, just willpower. Kyle closed his eyes, concentrated, tried to feel whatever that power was when it activated. Nothing happened. He pushed harder, focusing until his head hurt. Still nothing. It's not working, he said, opening his eyes, because you're not actually threatened. Your conscious mind knows you're safe, so the reflex doesn't activate. Philip tapped his stylus against his chin. We need real danger, but controlled. Something your hindbrain interprets as genuine threat. I have an idea, Ivy said. She picked up a wrench from the toolkit. No, Kyle said immediately. You don't know what I'm going to suggest. You're going to throw that wrench at my head. See? You do have precognitive abilities. She hefted the wrench, testing its weight. Relax. I have excellent aim. Probably. Probably? Fine. Definitely. I definitely have excellent aim. She grinned. Ready? This is against regulations, Philip started. The wrench flew. Kyle's hand shot up and the wrench froze, close enough that he could read the manufacturer's label. The glow was brighter this time, more stable. He held it there, feeling the strange sensation of reality bending around his will. Except it wasn't his will. It was something deeper, more primal. His conscious mind was just along for the ride. Interesting, Philip murmured, studying his readings. The activation is faster. You're getting more efficient. Or I'm just getting used to Ivy trying to kill me. It's called exposure therapy, Ivy said cheerfully. And technically, I'm helping. They ran through variations for the next hour. Different objects, different velocities, different angles. Kyle's success rate improved. Not perfect, but consistent enough that Philip's excitement became almost manic. The doctor filled 3 tablets with data, occasionally making sounds that ranged from to that shouldn't be possible, but here we are. The breakthrough came when Philip threw a pen without warning. Kyle stopped it, but the glow extended beyond his hand, creating a translucent barrier that intercepted the pen a full meter away. You expanded the field, Philip said, voice tight with barely contained enthusiasm. Your brain is learning to project the effect beyond your immediate physical space. That's, Kyle, do you understand what this means? That my brain is overachieving? That human psionic potential isn't fixed. It's adaptive, learning, growing. Philip pulled up comparative data. Other psionic species have defined limits. A telekinetic can lift X amount of mass. A telepath can read minds within Y distance. But you're showing improvement in real time. If this is representative of human psionic development... He didn't finish. The door opened and Magistrate Oxel entered, moving with unusual urgency for a being made of living crystal. Behind him came 2 figures Kyle didn't recognize. One a flowing mass of bioluminescent tendrils, the other something that hurt to look at directly, like reality couldn't quite decide on its geometry. We have a problem, Oxel said. Kyle, this is Magistrate Luxom from the Preservation Collective, and Observer Ixul Neff, neutral arbiter from the Void Clans. They're here for an emergency session. Already? Ivy straightened. You said we had 3 days. That was before the data leaked. Oxal's light pattern shifted into what Kyle had learned meant frustration. Someone, we don't know who, released recordings of Kyle's manifestation to the Council network. Every member species has seen it now. The Preservation Collective has called an emergency vote. It happens in 6 hours. 6 hours. Philip's voice cracked. That's not enough time to prove humans aren't the next Ulm? No, it's not. Oxal turned to Kyle. Which is why they're doing it. They want you unprepared, unable to make your case. They'll argue for immediate quarantine, and they have the votes to make it happen. The tendril being, Luxom, rippled with patterns that the translator rendered as speech. The concern is understandable. A species manifesting psionic abilities without warning, with unknown limits, with activation patterns outside established frameworks. The historical precedent suggests caution. The historical precedent is genocide, Ivy snapped. Let's call it what it is. The Ulm were not exterminated without cause. They became aggressive, expansionist. They used their abilities to subjugate other species. Luxom's bioluminescence pulsed. We cannot allow another Ulm situation. Humans aren't the Ulm, Kyle said. He kept his voice level, controlled, even though every instinct screamed to punch something, preferably Luxom's smug, glowing face, if it had a face. We're not trying to conquer anyone. Yet, Luxom said, you have been spacefaring for 30 years. The Ulm showed their true nature after 50. Time will reveal whether humanity follows the same path. We don't have time, Oxal cut in. The vote happens in 6 hours. Kyle, you have the right to address the Council before the vote. Ancient law, established after the Ulm situation specifically to prevent hasty judgments. But you'll need to present something compelling. Like what? A demonstration? Kyle gestured at the testing equipment. We just spent an hour figuring out that I can stop things from hitting me. That's not exactly reassuring for species worried about human aggression. Actually, Philip said slowly, it might be exactly what we need. Everyone turned to look at him. Think about it, Philip continued, ideas clearly forming as he spoke. Every psionic species in the database uses their abilities proactively. Telekinetics move objects. Telepaths read minds. They impose their will on reality. But Kyle's ability is reactive, defensive. It only triggers in response to threats. That's fundamentally different. So? Ivy asked. So the Ulm used psionics to attack, to conquer, to expand. They were aggressive by nature. But human psionics manifested as a survival mechanism, a last resort defense against danger. Philip pulled up evolutionary data on his tablet. Earth isn't like most inhabited worlds. It's hostile. Predators, diseases, environmental hazards, resource scarcity. Humans evolved under constant threat. Every human adaptation is about survival, through cooperation, tool use, problem-solving under pressure. Your psionic ability fits that pattern perfectly. Kyle felt something click into place. You're saying human psionics aren't about power. They're about protection. I'm saying human evolution optimized for not dying rather than killing. That's a crucial difference. Philip looked at Oxal. Can we present that to the Council? You can present whatever you want. Whether they'll listen. Oxal's patterns shifted. The Preservation Collective has already made their decision. They're going through with this vote to make it official, to get Council backing for whatever action they take. Changing their minds would require something extraordinary. Then we give them something extraordinary. Ivy said. She looked at Kyle. You demonstrate your ability, but not as a weapon. You prove that human psionics are defensive, protective. How? We set up a scenario. Something that shows your abilities activate to save, not harm. She started pacing, energy building. If Kyle's power only triggers under threat, we create a situation where the threat isn't to him, it's to someone else. If his ability activates to protect others, even potential enemies, that proves the defensive nature. That's dangerously theatrical, Oxul said. Theatricality is what the Council responds to. You know this. Ivy turned to Kyle. What do you think? Kyle looked at his hand. Ordinary, unremarkable, hiding something that could save humanity or doom it, depending on the next 6 hours. I think we don't have a choice. Then let's write the script, Philip said, and hope your biology cooperates. The council chamber had never felt so enormous. 200 species packed the observation. Tears, their attention focused on the central platform where Kyle stood. The air thrummed with translated whispers, clicks, hums, and sounds his implant couldn't categorize. Above it all, the holographic display showed his face magnified 50 times. Every bead of sweat, every nervous breath broadcast for galactic consumption. Perfect. Thixelon occupied the prosecutor's platform, all 4 arms spread in a gesture that managed to convey both authority and contempt. The evidence is clear. Humanity has manifested psionic abilities without precedent, without warning, without explanation. The historical parallel to the Ulm situation is undeniable. We propose immediate quarantine of the human homeworld, effective within 48 hours. All human vessels currently in Council space will be escorted to the quarantine boundary. Trade agreements are suspended pending indefinite review. Indefinite meaning permanent, Ivy muttered through Kyle's earpiece. She was in the observation deck with Philip, both banned from the floor, but patched into his comm. They're not even pretending this is temporary. Magistrate Oxul rose from his seat, light refracting through his crystalline form. The Council recognizes Kyle's right to address these charges before the vote. Ancient law, established after the Ulm situation, grants the accused species opportunity for defense. The accused species is not on trial, Thixelon countered. This is preventative action. The accused species has the right to speak. Oxul's voice carried harmonics that made the chamber's walls resonate. Unless the Preservation Collective has decided ancient law no longer applies when it's inconvenient. That got murmurs. Even species sympathetic to quarantine didn't want to set precedents about ignoring established council law. Thixelon's mandibles clicked rapidly, frustration, but he gestured assent. Kyle stepped forward. Public speaking had never been his strength, but he'd prepared remarks with Philip and Ivy during the frantic hours before this session. Reasonable points, logical arguments, appeals to scientific curiosity over fear. He abandoned all of it. You're right, Kyle said. We are like the Ulm. We developed psionic abilities fast, without warning, in ways your databases can't explain. If I were you, I'd be terrified. Hell, I'm terrified. And these are my hands doing impossible things. Philip's voice crackled in his ear. Kyle, what are you doing? That's not the script. But there's one crucial difference between humans and the Ulm, Kyle continued. We can prove it, right here, right now. I'm requesting a demonstration under controlled conditions. Thixelon's exoskeleton flushed purple. Absolutely not. We will not allow. You want evidence that humans are dangerous? Kyle spread his arms. Here I am. Test it. Put me in a situation where my abilities would activate. Let the Council see exactly what human psionics do when triggered. The chamber erupted. Dozens of foe species talking over each other, translators struggling to keep up. Oxul raised an appendage for silence. "You're proposing we deliberately activate your abilities? That seems necessary," Kyle finished. "You're going to quarantine my entire species based on fear of what we might do. I'm offering proof of what we actually do. Unless the Preservation Collective is afraid of evidence?" That was calculated. Species that valued logic and precedent didn't respond well to implications of cowardice. Thixelon clearly wanted to refuse. His mandibles clicked so rapidly it sounded like machine gun fire, but half the council was already murmuring approval. "Very well," Luxem said, the tendril being's bioluminescence pulsing. "A controlled demonstration. We will provide the parameters." "Oh, this is bad," Ivy said in his ear. "Kyle, they're going to stack this against you." "I know." Kyle kept his expression neutral, while his heart tried to break out of his ribcage. Luxem conferred briefly with Thixelon and 2 other Preservation Collective members. Whatever they discussed made Thixelon's expression, as much as compound eyes and mandibles could express anything, shift toward satisfaction. Never a good sign. "The parameters," Luxem announced. 3 Krethar warriors will enter the chamber. They will be armed with live weapons. They will attack Kyle with lethal intent. If his abilities activate in self-defense, it proves nothing, merely that humans can protect themselves. If he fails to defend himself, the bioluminescence pulsed. Well, the problem resolves itself. "That's murder," Philip said flatly through the comm. "That's a test," Thixelon corrected. "One the human proposed. We're simply defining the conditions." Kyle's mind raced. This was the setup. They'd created a situation where his defensive abilities would be expected, meaningless. If he protected himself, it proved nothing. If he didn't, he died, and humanity lost its advocate. Classic no-win scenario, his favorite kind. "I accept," Kyle said. "One modification. Make the 3rd attacker someone from the Preservation Collective. Someone who actually wants this quarantine to happen. Give them a reason to make this test. Thorough." Thixelon's mandibles stopped clicking. For a moment, the entire chamber went silent. "You want us to try to kill you," Thixelon said slowly. "I want you to create genuine danger. Isn't that the point? Real conditions, real threat, real demonstration of what human psionics actually do?" "Kyle," Ivy hissed, "have you lost your mind?" Possibly. Probably. But the script they'd planned wouldn't work anymore. Luxem and Thixelon had seen to that. Time for improvisation, humanity's actual specialty. Thixelon conferred with his colleagues again. When he turned back, his compound eyes gleamed. "Accepted. I will participate personally. 3 attackers, live weapons, no restraints. If you survive, we'll reconsider our position." "If he survives," Ivy muttered. "Oh, sure. Totally reasonable stakes." The chamber transformed. Force fields erected around the central platform, creating an arena. Weapons were brought out. Krethar blades, energy weapons, projectile firearms from 3 different species. Kyle watched them prepare and tried to keep his breathing steady. Philip's voice was tight. "The plan was to show your abilities protect others, not yourself. This doesn't—" "I know. Watch for it." "Watch for what?" "The opening. Trust me." 2 Krethar warriors entered the arena, followed by Thixelon himself. All 3 were armed. All 3 looked at Kyle like he was a problem they were eager to solve permanently. The force field sealed with a hum that Kyle felt in his bones. "Begin," Oxul said. They didn't waste time with posturing. The warriors came in fast from two angles while Thixlon circled, calculating. Kyle moved on instinct. Dodge, weave, use the space. A blade came within centimeters of his neck, and his hand lit up, stopping it mid-swing. The crowd reacted, but Kyle couldn't hear them over the sound of his pulse. One of the warriors fired an energy weapon. Kyle's other hand shot up, creating a barrier that absorbed the blast. The blue-white glow intensified, spreading from his palms up his arms. His brain was in pure survival mode now, physics taking a back seat to not dying. "He's defending himself," Thixlon announced, breathing hard. "As expected. This proves nothing about human nature, only that they can manifest psionics for self-preservation." Kyle saw the setup coming. Thixlon moved accidentally toward the arena's edge, where the force field generators were exposed. One of the warriors, tracking Kyle's movement, swung wide, too wide. The momentum carried him toward Thixlon, toward the force field generator that, if damaged, would collapse the containment and potentially kill everyone in the first 3 rows of the observation deck. The warrior stumbled, pushed by another attacker's mistimed strike, directly into the generator. His blade raised, edge first, toward the exposed power coupling. Kyle's brain processed the threat in microseconds. Not to him, to the generator, to the crowd, to dozens of beings who'd come here expecting debate, not death by containment failure. His hand shot out. The warrior froze mid-fall, surrounded by blue-white light that blazed like a star. Kyle held him there, suspended, every muscle in his body screaming with effort. The glow extended beyond his hands, beyond his arms, creating a luminescent web that caught the warrior and pulled him back from the generator. Away from danger. The chamber went silent. Kyle set the warrior down gently, then collapsed to one knee. The glow faded. His hands shook. "Sorry," he gasped. "Reflex." "He saved Vic's toll," someone in the crowd said. Kyle couldn't identify the species. The human could have let the containment fail, could have let the warrior damage the generator. It would have proven nothing about his abilities and removed the threat to himself. Instead, he protected his attacker, Oxul said quietly. Even knowing it wouldn't help his case. Even knowing... "It was instinct," Kyle interrupted, still catching his breath. "I saw the danger and reacted. That's what human psionics do. We don't think about it. We protect, even enemies, even when it's stupid, especially when it's stupid." Thixlon stared at him, mandibles motionless. The warrior Kyle had saved, Vic's toll, approached slowly, blade lowered. He clicked something in Krethar that the translator rendered simply as gratitude, confusion, respect. Kyle managed a weak smile. "Yeah, I get that a lot." The vote happened an hour later. The quarantine proposal failed, not unanimously, but decisively. 62 species voted against, citing Kyle's demonstration as evidence that human psionic development followed a fundamentally different evolutionary path than the Ulm. Restrictions remained. Humans with psionic abilities would be monitored, trained by neutral parties from the Lucath Union. Regular evaluations, strict protocols, but Earth's connection to the galactic community stayed intact. Kyle returned to his quarters to find Ivy already there, sitting on his bed with contraband coffee and a grin. "You realize," she said, "that you just changed history by being too stupidly heroic to let someone die, even when they were literally trying to kill you. That's humanity for you." Kyle collapsed into the chair. "We specialize in stupid heroics. And catching blades mid-air, apparently." Something flew toward his face. Kyle's hand shot up automatically and a pen stopped mid-flight, glowing faintly. Ivy's grin widened. "Okay," Kyle said, looking at the suspended pen. "That one I meant to do." "Progress," Ivy declared. "Stupid, reflexive, completely uncontrolled progress." Through the viewport, ships moved between the stars. Trade vessels, diplomatic envoys, exploration craft. Humanity was still out there, still reaching, still proving that being the new species in a galaxy of ancients didn't mean you had to play by their rules. Sometimes you just had to catch a blade mid-air and trust your instincts knew what they were doing, even when those instincts violated physics and common sense in equal measure. Somewhere on the station, Dixlon was probably filing reports about the security implications of defensive psionics. Oxel was likely cataloging data on human neural patterns. Luxom was reconvening the Preservation Collective to discuss updated protocols. And Kyle was sitting in his quarters, making a pen float just because he could, while his best friend threw things at him and laughed. Humanity had arrived in the cosmos 3 decades ago as primitives with stolen technology and borrowed time. They'd proven today they weren't leaving anytime soon.